No, I can't.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to go ahead and let people join, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Just give everyone a minute. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a moment. I'm just going to let a few more people jump in here. All righty. All right. Well, I think folks are still joining, but we're going to go ahead and get started as it's the top of the hour. But thank you for joining us. My name is Nicole Kaysen, and I'm the event marketing specialist here at Consensus, and I am going to be your moderator for today's session. So this webinar is presented by Consensus, Transform How You Sell with Consensus, the first product experience platform, automate demos, drive faster decisions, and accelerate growth. You can learn more at goconsensus.com. So we do have two very quick and exciting announcements before we start. We are very excited for another year of DemoFest. We will be in San Francisco for DemoFest X on February 20th, and you can register at demofest.com or the link that I will post in the chat in just a second. And then we're also very excited to announce the Demis, which will take place on December 12th. So you can join us for an event that celebrates the art of the perfect demo. You can watch the most innovative demos, get tips from top performers, and see who takes home the awards. So you can RSVP today by using the second link that I will post in the chat. And now, just a few housekeeping items. We do encourage you to participate in today's webinar. Our speaker will answer any questions at the close of the session, but you are welcome to post your questions at any time through the Q&A box on the right side of your console. And if at any time you're having any technical difficulties, just press the help button on the right side of your screen. So now I would like to introduce our speaker, Max. Max helps B2B companies create memorable demos and customer experiences. With over a decade in sales and pre-sales roles, Max has seen how impactful solutions engineers can be when they go beyond product knowledge. His goal is to make them their company's unfair advantage by showing customers real value and guiding them through a unique buying journey. On LinkedIn, where over 10,000 people follow him, Max shares his tips for creating demos that stick. He combines learning with a few good memes to keep things both useful and fun, looking to provide actionable, easy to implement insights. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Max.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Let's start sharing my screen, which should be this one. Let me know if you can see something.
You're good.
We are good. Perfect. 1 second. Let me quickly set up this again. Cool. Yeah, thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you very much, Consensus, for having me again. About a month ago, I think I was doing the same presentation at DemoFest in London, which was great, meeting so many people in person. And really great so many people are joining for today's session, which is around bad and better demo questions. And what I would like to do with you today over the next 30 to 60 minutes, I would say, is raise some awareness for questions that look good at first glance, especially the feedback you receive, but which might lead to some false conclusions, and then also provide you with some advice how you can do better and makes this really as actionable and easy to implement as possible. If you note, upfront about myself. So this is how I look like in real life, same like here on the screen. And if you haven't guessed it from my accent already, I am from Germany. And more specifically, I live in the city of Cologne, which I would say it's not a pretty, not a beautiful city, not at all, but it's one of the most fun places to live in Germany. And because I like to meet with like-minded people and other pre-sales and solution engineers, I would like to encourage you every time you're around. You're more than welcome to let me know. Happy to show you around, have a few drinks. Just one thing up front to manage expectations. In Cologne, we drink beer from these very tiny little glasses because sometimes people are a little bit disappointed when they come from abroad because we don't have these huge steins here. I think that's how you call them. In Cologne, we have these little glasses, and actually we hardly ever drink from steins here. That's only one part of Germany. But if you are around, let me know. We also have a local pre-sales meetup where we gather every second month. And it's always great to just meet, hang out, and exchange some stories. I'm running a business which is called Pre-Sales Rockstars. And with Pre-Sales Rockstars, it is really my mission to enable pre-sales, sales, solution engineers, you name it, to become what I call the unfair advantage of any sales organization. Because I think it's really people like you that can make all the difference in enterprise sales. I mean, we have heard a lot, and this is also part of the consensus value proposition that nowadays, most of our customers, they spend most of their time purchasing and looking for new software on their own because they don't really want to speak to salespeople any longer, trying to avoid us, at least the real salespeople, the account executives, as long as they can. But I still believe that people buy from people. And this is why I think it's so important that we deliver a good customer experience. And the customer experience really is about how we engage with our customers, how we work with them, and the feeling we provide to them so they feel really confident in what we can do for them. And this is what I call the unfair advantage in pre-sales. And I do think so because my entire career, I have worked in startups and in scale-ups. So I'm not really a corporate guy. And if there is one thing or two things that startups have in common, then it's about one, startups have a great idea and a really great vision. That's why it's so fun to work for them and you can really make a difference. But on the other hand, startups usually have quite shitty products, I would say. And I don't just mean it's a little rough around the edges. It's sometimes really hard to get something working on customer side to show things because it's loosely connected bits and pieces and it's not really smooth in terms of experience. So the only way you can really compete is by better understanding your customer situation, by having more insightful and in-depth discussion with your customers to be able to really provide them with a solution that will clearly illustrate to them how you can solve their challenges. And this is really what I consider the unfair advantage and the difference that you can make when working with your customers. So enough about me. Let's get going with the presentation. And first of all, what I need to do is maybe break a little bit of a myth, because at least when I was a little kid, my parents were coming at me and saying, Maximilian, and they knew every time they were saying Maximilian, I knew things were getting a bit more serious. My parents told me, Maximilian, whenever you don't know something, whenever you don't understand a thing, just ask a question, because there are no bad questions, there are only bad answers. And to some extent, they were right, I think, because at least I learned to speak up and only try to gather more information when I didn't understand a thing. But during my time in sales and pre-sales, I actually learned that and experienced that there are also questions which might be a little bit misleading. There are a lot of questions which sound good at first glance, because also you get feedback, which you think sounds very positive. But it might be a bit trickier over time when you start to work with these responses and realized, where did things go off track? So today, together with you, I would like to raise a little bit of awareness for these kind of tricky questions and tricky responses and provide you with the insights. So it's really about what I would like to give to you is something you can apply for your very next demo, also for your discovery call. Actually, the good thing about asking questions is you can apply it everywhere in life. And I really want to make it as actionable as possible and start on something which I would say is but it gets a bit more complicated over time during the session. But first of all, unfortunately, I cannot get any people raising their hands here right now, but this is something usually that 90% of us are guilty of. And this is asking the question after presenting a feature to our customer, if something makes sense. And I get that this is a question and it's with good intentions, because you would like to check with your customer if they are still able to follow you along and whether they have any questions, and also to engage with them at the very same time. But let's be very honest, the feedback you get from that question is usually a simple yes, because 99% of the times you would get yes as an answer. Because if they would say something else like no, that would either mean that they were not able to follow along with you, and usually people don't admit this, especially not in front of their colleagues, or it would mean that you were not doing a good job in presenting your solution. So it's not giving any meaningful insights, and also at the same time, it's not very engaging, because after the yes, the conversation is already at an end. And this is one of the first things that you need to understand, that if you want to have a meaningful conversation, you need to ask meaningful questions, and meaningful questions are the ones that are leading you to new insights. If you ask something like, do you think water is wet? You will always get a yes, which is no news to you. So this is not a meaningful question. And one thing that you can do, instead of saying, does it make sense, is really just using something like, is this what you had in mind? Because this is opening up the conversation far more. And you can start to understand a bit more about your customer's thought process, how they would put things in order, what you just showed to them. And it's a first way to gather new insights, and don't just go for a yes or no closed question. But I think this pretty much is a no-brainer. But things are getting a bit more tricky, and I would like to travel back in time with you a little, and go back to New Year's Eve 2022-23. And I think it was sometime around 3 a.m. in the morning. So certainly I had 1 or 2 or 10 of these little beer glasses we have. You stop losing count because they're so small. And we were discussing our New Year's resolutions for the year. And at one point I came up with a statement that I am going to do my very first marathon. And I wanted to do this in just 4 months' time, because this was the local one in my hometown back in the days. And because sometimes I'm a little stupid, I also announced that I'm not just going to finish this. When I do this, I want to do it properly. And I want to do it faster than 3 hours and 45 minutes, which I think for the first marathon is ambitious. I wasn't a newbie to running, but it was challenging, I would say. And on the other hand, I had to build a little bit of social pressure. So sometimes I like to have my friends, my peers holding me accountable for doing something. But I committed to this, so I kind of had to follow through. And things were going all right for the first month and 1.5, I would say. But at one point in time, I was starting to experience some minor injuries and always some joint issues. And I was talking to a friend who was doing triathlons back in the day. And he recommended me to work with a personal trainer that he also used to consult in the past. And apparently that guy was doing a good job. So what I did, I called that guy. We sat down in a coffee bar and had a really nice chat initially. and he was doing some thorough discovery with me, asking me, why do I want to do a marathon? What is my motivation? What are my ambitions? How fast do I want to go? All these basic questions, I would say. But at one point in time, the entire discussion started to shift slightly into a different direction, because the guy was not just a personal trainer, he was also a nutritional expert. And he started to ask me questions like, do you think it would be beneficial for you, or do you think it's beneficial for your performance if you eat healthy? And I said, yeah, I think so. And as a follow-up, he said, okay, would you eat more vegetables if this would improve your performance? And again, I said, yeah, why not eat more vegetables if this is good? I don't have anything against it. And a few seconds later, that guy took out his iPad and started to show me around a meal planning app that he had prepared. So suddenly I was in a demo session, which I don't mind, because demos are my guilty pleasure. This is how I make my money. And he was showing me around his platform, telling like, hey, here you can add your preferences, like what are your favorite vegetables, what is your calorie intake, what are your ambitions, and then the system would calculate for you a couple of recipes and shopping lists. So you always eat in accordance with what you have to eat and what you like, and this will be beneficial for your performance as well for running the marathon. So he was doubling down really hard on the questions you can see here. Now the thing is, that I do eat my vegetables, that vegetables aren't my big issue. I'm eating a whole lot of food, and chicken salad is one of my favorite meals, for example. So I don't have an issue with vegetables. My real issue is that I'm a really snackish person. I'm constantly hungry, and my main issue really is not with the normal dishes. My main issue is what's happening in between those dishes. And every 2 weeks, I try to not eat for 36 hours. I just did this the past 36 hours, and only then I realize how often a day I get up from this table to go to the kitchen, open the fridge, or open that bottom drawer in the living room to just get some chocolate or whatever I find there. It's crazy, and I sometimes need this to just become aware of how much stuff I actually eat in between meals. But the thing here was that the coach had asked me a couple of hypothetical questions, like, do you think it's beneficial if you would eat more vegetables? And do you think it would improve your performance if you would do so? And as a result of asking me these hypothetical questions, what I gave him were hypothetical answers, like, yes, why not? And yeah, I could see myself doing this. So when you ask these hypothetical questions, it is very common that you get positive feedback, but this positive feedback is hypothetical. And hypothetical feedback oftentimes is what we call a false positive. It sounds great, it sounds positive at first glance, but in all seriousness, it is not very reliable what you get out of here. And this is the same in enterprise software. If you ask your customers a hypothetical question of something they would do and they give you positive feedback, very often when it gets serious, when they have to engage with further stakeholders, when they have to initiate a purchasing process, you will suddenly see that they will start to ghost you or suddenly aren't as committed as you think because you have been doubling down on the wrong feedback, on something that is false positive. And this is very human behavior on both sides, because as humans, we can imagine and we can think of doing a lot of things in the future. We are really, maybe it's the wrong phrasing. So we are really good at making future promises, but we are really bad at following through and committing to these. Think about yourself whenever you make New Year's resolutions. How often do you actually follow through with them, and how often do you turn them into reality? Also, sometimes I sign up for something long in the future, like the marathon, because I think, hey, this is a problem of Future Max, and then Future Max will need to deal with it. I don't have to do it right now. And by asking these hypothetical questions, you quite often invite this kind of feedback. And for me, it was a little bit the same with the marathon. Like January 3rd, I was starting to struggle. I wasn't sure whether I should actually do this. My issue was that I already paid around $200 to sign up for the marathon. So, and there was no refund policy, so I kind of had to pull through. But please remember that asking hypothetical questions will lead to hypothetical feedback. And our job in pre-sales, in solution engineering, and in every kind of sales role is not to do any kind of fortune telling. So you should not ask for questions like, would you ever, do you ever, how would you, can you envision, could you see yourself doing something? Because all these questions will invite those future-based responses, which won't be reliable. So please try to eliminate these kind of questions from what you use, or at least try to become aware of that. If you use them, you need to double check and dig a little deeper into the responses you actually get. And we will do so together later on. But please try to eliminate this. At London Demo Fest, people took pictures of this slide, which I didn't approve because, again, try to forget about it. And you can pretty much imagine that every time you ask one of these would or could questions, and apologies for this rather poor ChatGPT image here, but what I would like to illustrate is that every time you ask one of these questions, you're diverging a little bit from reality. Every time you ask such questions, you're adding a further branch to decision-making tree. And at one point in time, it gets super, super complex when in fact, there's only one one way that will lead you to the pot of gold or to the budget, and all the rest is just nice to have, something people have dreamt of, and some kind of fake parallel reality. So this is the danger of asking these hypothetical questions, because you can quickly get off track. So let's revisit the situation of speaking to the personal trainer for the first time and see how things could have gone a little differently. So instead of asking me a hypothetical question about what I do think about certain nutrition, you could have just said, hey, Max, can you tell me a bit more about what does your current diet look like? And I would have told him something like, well, I eat a lot. I've got a healthy balance of protein, of carbs, of vitamins. I eat a lot of chicken salad. I like broccoli, all that kind of stuff. So I would say the balance is all right. And then you could ask me, okay, hey, but then why isn't that working for you precisely? And I would have told him, hey, again, I'm a snackish person. It's what's happening in between these meals. It's the chocolate bars, it's the crisps, all that kind of unhealthy stuff that I eat. So I would disclose to him what my actually issues are. And then you might have asked him like, hey, okay, since you know that this is a problem and this is maybe not the ideal solution, what have you tried to stop eating all these snacks? And I might have told him, hey, I've tried fruits, but you always have to buy them fresh in the supermarket. You have to wash them. You have to cut them in slices. It's just not as convenient as going to the fridge or having a bar of chocolate. It's not that instant gratification, at least not for the first 30 seconds. And then you could also ask, okay, then tell me when was actually the very last time this happened? And for me, this is especially true, for example, when I'm traveling for business, because I'm really bad at doing meal prep, and I'm usually eating at McDonald's, or in the UK, I'm having meal deals with chocolate bars and BLT sandwiches and Coke. So now he has a very good understanding of what I'm doing at the moment. This is really fact-based and not just dreamt up scenario based on hypothetical questions. And this would have led him to a completely different conclusion. Because on the left-hand side, what you see here is the feedback or the conclusion, the premature conclusion he made based on the hypothetical questions he was asking me about eating more vegetables. And as a result, he doubled down on my false positive feedback of me saying, yeah, why not? Showing me around the software. But I wasn't interested in a solution that helps me eat more veggies, because I already do so. What I would actually be interested in more would be something that is helping me to eat healthy in a more convenient way. And this is all based on facts. And this is where the money actually is. So you can see it's kind of the same situation initially, but based on the questions you ask, you can create two completely different scenarios. One that will never come true, and one that is really based on facts and my current way of doing things. And this is why it's so important to pay attention to those hypothetical questions that you ask. But it's really not that difficult. And one thing that we are very prone to is to fall for compliments and get blind very quickly, because the second we get positive feedback, our brain stops to work, at least for a second. And this is normal, because we like to be good at our job. So we really like getting positive feedback from our customers, and we like when we get positive feedback on the product we're selling, because we believe in what we're doing. So it's normal to be happy, at least for a second. But we still have to pause, because very often when we hear something like, hey, you said you could possibly imagine using this, we are like, yay. And again, brain stops working. And this could, for example, look like this, again, leading us to false conclusion. Let's imagine you're in a demo and you're presenting your solution to a customer. And at the end of the feature presentation, you ask them, hey, do you think this feature is helpful? And your customer will tell you, hey, this looks cool, a really interesting concept. And you're like, yes, great feedback. And suddenly you see your sales guy waking up in the background out saying, cool, when can I share the proposal with you? Because, hey, this is positive feedback. And this is how our brain works oftentimes. And this is also what we call happy ears in sales and pre-sales, because we're looking for these positive signals. sometimes we're like this little puppy getting its stick and then taking off, running away. It's like the seller going to the CRM, putting that deal into commit stage. This is how we work, and this is how we make premature conclusions based on oftentimes positive signals that we get. But what I would like you to do in these situations is I would like you to pause for a moment and to go a little deeper and ideally try to deflect the compliment or understand where this is coming from. Because in the very same situation, the outcome could be completely different. So again, we are presenting a feature to your customer. You ask them whether they think this is helpful. And again, they tell you, hey, looks great, really interesting concept. And you say, cool, thank you very much. That's great to hear. But can you walk me through how you're currently doing this today in your business, in your processes? And then suddenly you might get feedback like, to be honest, I've never thought about this. Looks interesting, but so far I wasn't really aware of this being a problem or something we could potentially address. And suddenly you see, hey, maybe this is not an issue at all because they haven't thought about it in the first place. It might be nice to have, but oftentimes in the previous example, we would start to double down on that kind of positive feedback and build our business case around it. But here we have to pause, we have to deflect and really see if this is an issue or if people are just being nice to us. And you will see so later that oftentimes people are just being nice, which is okay, but oftentimes misleading. So compliment, be happy for a brief moment, but then please start to question a little further and get to the bottom of things here. Another thing that can be tricky sometimes is asking people for opinions, because sometimes this will also, you will get biased responses, which again are not necessarily rooted in reality and are just made up. Because when you ask people for their opinion, they will very often tell you what they think you want to hear. And I was in a similar situation 2 weeks ago because I was looking for a software solution for myself, helping me with the fun part of German bookkeeping, accounting, and taxation. And I was sitting through another demo. And the guy was talking to me about some German tax regulation policies, and he was pretending like everybody should know, or at least I felt like I should know about the following regulations. And also at one point in time, he asked me, does everything make sense? And this time I didn't want to look embarrassed in front of him. So I said, totally, I totally get this. Makes sense, when I actually had no clue. But I wanted to say what he wanted to hear and don't look stupid in front of that person. Or sometimes they will tell you things that they think they would do, but that don't really align with what they would actually do in real life. So what we have to do here is really understand, okay, tell me more about how your things today or how we have solved them in the past, other things that you might have tried. And this, for example, when talking to people who smoke, I've got a lot of friends who are always telling me, I smoke now, but I could stop smoking anytime. But seriously, I've never seen them even try. Or if they've tried, they probably have failed. So in this case, it would be interesting to understand, okay, tell me, when was the last time you have tried to stop smoking and what went wrong there? Like, well, every time I'm out with my friends having some drinks, I start to smoke again and back I am. So it's really important to figure out the behavior and not just their opinion of what they think they would do. Because really, talk is cheap, and real customer insights come from what people have done and not what they think they would do in the future, because this is not reliable at all, as we have heard, because we can imagine so many different things, but reality oftentimes is really, really different. So let's have another look at how this actually applies, especially to doing demos. And one example here again is after presenting a feature. What are questions that you should not be asking? Number one, again, does this make sense to you, or does this resonate with you? It's both not providing any new insights. But then oftentimes I hear all these kind of would questions. How would your situation change if you do this? Do you think this will help you? Can you envision your team using this? And how would you feel if you could do this? And how would this impact your productivity? So all of this is, again, creating hypothetical scenarios, asking for opinions, asking for feedback, but nothing that is fact-based, nothing that is really tangible and where you have proof that this is really an issue or that they will do so. So all these can be misleading and you have to be really careful. Instead, what you should ask after presenting a feature is, how are you currently doing this? And how is this different from what you're doing today? Because again, then you get facts, then you get behaviors, then you get the current processes. What else have you tried in case this has been a problem? Why didn't they change already? But with why questions, sometimes you have to be a little bit careful because people will quickly start to justify why they've been doing something. So sometimes they've implemented another solution, and usually they have done so for a good reason. So if you start to question why they're doing things the way they are, if you have got the product owner in the meeting, it might get a little nasty. So be careful with a couple of why questions. But again, try to uncover past behavior, try to uncover how things are being done today and not how they think they would do things in the future. And the same applies when, for example, you receive a feature request during a demo. And at this point in time, actually, it is okay to ask a would question, but only if you be careful and if you ask a good follow-up question. So when you receive a feature request, rather than running to product or making any kind of feature commitment, it's much more effective to ask them, hey, what would this feature allow you to do? And then they will tell you something that they have come up with. And then you could still ask them, okay, but can you tell me how you're doing things today? And once again, and this is my personal experience, oftentimes they will tell you, well, we're not doing this at all. I just heard about this for the very first time. I was interested in how you can maybe apply this differently, how you can do this in your software, but it's not actually a thing. So even feature requests, you have to vet a little before you run to product and make any premature commitments over here. And a tough question might be if they really think they have something to ask them, do you think we have to push back the launch of our program, or can you start without? And then again, you'll realize that some things aren't as serious and important as people might think at a first glance. And then there is one last lesson, and this is, it's true for sales, but in my experience, it's even more true for pre-sales professionals, because we really don't like rejection. And this also applies to me personally. We oftentimes tend to ask questions which only look for positive feedback. And I'm really good at framing questions in a way that they will always result in positive feedback, even if it's bad. Because really, we don't want to get rejection or negative feedback oftentimes. But we have to do so because sometimes we need to ask something which I call an uncomfortable or fearful questions, because we need to surface those objections which are currently underneath the surface, which are just starting to grow and grow and grow over time if we do not address them proactively. Because only if we do so, we can start to change and start to work on these objections and actually resolve them. Because if not, suddenly, shortly before signing the contract, some objection might come up which we didn't ask for, and suddenly we have a showstopper. So our role is to surface these objections by asking questions which might potentially lead to negative feedback. And I have experienced this myself. Actually, I was with a customer. I thought we were already in negotiation and we were ready to sign the deal. And at one point in time, I asked him whether everybody else was also aligned with that. And he said, well, actually, people in APAC have a different opinion. And suddenly, shortly before closing a deal, I had to resolve something with the people in APAC. So we have to push for no sometimes to know what we have to work at and not just get a blindsided before it's too late. And there are a couple of, call them powerful, fearful, uncomfortable questions, which will really help you to surface these objections. And I oftentimes get the feedback that these kind of questions are actually something that the sellers should do. And I agree with you, part of this is the seller's job. But even they don't like to get rejected oftentimes. So also they phrase questions in a way that the feedback will be rather positive. So it's a team effort. And if you realize that your seller is not doing their homework, then please either prompt them or ask these kind of questions yourself. But if you speak to your champion and they're really invested, try to understand if their management is also interested in this, or if they are not, if the entire deal is off the table. If they have colleagues who have the same opinion, or if there are people with different priorities and different preferences, or worst case, what would happen if we missed the timeline? Would anything bad happen at all? If not, then we probably don't have a compelling business case. And you got to rework on this. But you need to ask these kind of questions to get to the things that you need to work on proactively, because otherwise people will just keep all this kind of information underneath the surface and not address this with you. And one example for this, where I think this really applies, is when it comes to customer reviews. I've talked before about customers trying to spend as little time as possible with the sellers and rather do research themselves. And in these reports, you can also see that about 95 to 98% of the people or prospects go to any kind of these review site, G2, Capterra, Gartner, and they would read about your customers reviewing your product. So by the time they come to your demo, most likely they have read through a couple of reviews. And I've just copied one example here from Consensus, which is quite up to date. It's not even a month old. And you can see this is a 5-star rating, but even though it's a 5-star rating, everybody who provides a review has to provide something that they dislike about the product, what they dislike about Consensus in this case. And I don't know whether this is about my little inner German, but I'm mostly interested in what people dislike. I'm not interested in the fancy 5-star reviews. I want to know what people dislike about a product. And when I come to a demo, I will have that in my mind somewhere. And so will your customers. So what you could do at one point in time, depending on how good you are with your customers, you could ask them the question, hey, just out of curiosity, did you come across any of our reviews and any of the popular sites? Are there any questions, anything that is worrying you a little? So you can proactively ask them for this kind of negative feedback and see whether you can resolve it. And then you can tick it off instead of having this sit there until the rest of the sales cycle. And again, 95, 98% of people will do so. Just ask them and see how they respond. And ideally, you should also know about your reviews. So ideally, you should have a check yourself regularly and see what people are talking about online about your product, and have a good response ready. But please do ask this proactively, and then things will become much, much easier. So to summarize, what makes bad and better questions and enables you to have more meaningful conversations. Bad questions are the ones really that ask for opinions and that create these fake, hypothetical, future-based scenarios when people can really think of doing a lot, but will never ever commit to. And those vague responses are really not worth the money. And others oftentimes fish for compliments, they fish for approvals, and that's why they frame questions in a certain way. And others also tend to put their words in their customer's mouth, which is also a little difficult because we will actually want to know what the words our customers use to describe the situation, so we can use it throughout our business cases. So it's really important to not ask any kind of suggestive questions, but rather let them explain things in their own words, because this is much more powerful and much less biased than you fishing for positive stuff or putting your words in their mouth. So instead, try to get insights about the current state, how they're doing things today, and what they've done in the past. Invite this kind of negative feedback, ask the uncomfortable questions. Pause whenever you get a compliment to really understand, okay, why do you like this specifically? Is there a case or is there not a case? And oftentimes there is none. People just want to be nice and say something they think you would like to hear. So you can let them share their real thoughts, and you always keep a door open for them to address these kind of issues. And the same summary here. Meaningful conversation, meaningful questions are the ones which will lead to more meaningful insights. So no, does it make sense? No closed questions, usually something that you can really work with in the future. And don't invite these hypothetical responses. Don't fall for fake compliments by asking these kind of questions. And be careful whenever you get an opinion, because again, people will tell you a whole lot of things, but it's not important about what they think they would do, but about the things they've done in the past. And that's why you also have to ask these tough, uncomfortable questions at times. if you would like to learn more, and Nicolas mentioned this before, please feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to share something that is really actionable, at least once or twice a week, about things you can implement right away without having to reverse engineer your entire demo track. Something that's more engaging, and sometimes some people call me a little crazy when I'm trying to combine Pokemon and demos, which is my generation, or some other things. But I think it's always good to have a little bit of fun, which also makes learnings stickier. So you're very welcome. And if you would like to have a list of all the questions I went through today and even more, you can download a free cheat sheet here. Actually, I've updated this. It's 54 questions, also including some you should not ask. I'm always happy to see customers sending me pictures of this printed out in front of their computer when doing a demo. So here are a lot of examples following the principles we have been discussing today for scenarios like feature presentation, requests, when your customers engage, disengage, when concluding your demo. So lots of real demo scenarios where you can apply these. And if you have been wondering, I promised you some end results on my marathon. This is me certainly not enjoying things. But in the end, I made it. I made it in 3 hours and 43 minutes. It was my first and last ever marathon, I would say. But at least mission accomplished. But not my best day. So again, thank you very much. If you want to download the cheat sheet, you're very welcome. And if you have any questions, any meaningful questions, of course, so pressure is on you now. Happy to answer these.
All right. Thank you, Max. That was really great content. I'm glad to see that you reached your goal in your marathon. So we're now going to open the floor to questions. So be sure to post your questions in the Q&A box on the right side of your console. We already have a few coming in. The first one, would you say those questions are good for when a deal is stalled?
Of course, when a deal is stalled, I would always look for, ideally, I would ask those uncomfortable questions or powerful questions before a deal is being stalled, because we would like to surface these objections before it's too late. And I would use them throughout the entire sales cycle, to be fair, because usually there is one stage usually in a sales process which is called discovery, but just because we have left discovery and entered demo or POC or negotiation doesn't mean that discovery stops, because there are always new stakeholders, there are always priorities that change. So you always have to ask these kind of questions. Yeah, again, it's the goal here is to really understand things before it's too late.
Another one says, oftentimes my sales executives ask those questions that shouldn't be asked after presenting a feature. How do you mitigate that without sounding rude and totally derailing their question?
I'm a huge fan of aligning with customers or with account executives before demos. So if you're interested, I've prepared an entire checklist around what is the purpose of a demo with a customer, what is it we would like to achieve together, what is the core message, what is it we are going to present, and then align upfront on what kind of questions we want to ask. And I think at one point in time, also when you show more initiative and you take on more ownership, or you try to also push and nudge your account executives in a certain direction, I think once you're more familiar with working with each other, hopefully they will stop asking these kind of stupid questions, because let's be honest, sometimes the account executives, they want to play a role in the demo. They want to show that they are not just sleeping, but also asking some questions which are not necessarily on point. But prepare together with them, align with them, tell them when they're asking stupid, less insightful questions. But I think over time, once you get familiar with each other, it should work out nicely.
Awesome. We do have a few shout outs saying congrats with the marathon.
Thank you. It's 2.5 years ago. I feel worse than ever.
All right. If anyone else has questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A. We'll give it just another few minutes for anyone to ask some questions. Anyone thinks of anything afterwards, feel free to follow Max on LinkedIn, like he's mentioned. Oh, here's we got one. What is your favorite go-to question you always ask?
My favorite go-to question is, I mentioned before that sometimes you have to be careful when asking a why questions, but whenever I've surfaced a problem and people have acknowledged the problem, I really ask them, why haven't you changed already? So if you know this is a problem, why haven't you done anything about it? And then oftentimes you realize, okay, the problem is just a nice to have, or it's not as important as you would think. So for me, I always compare this when I start my car, I always get a warning in the dashboard telling me service is overdue. But my car is 12 years old. It doesn't need proper service anymore, which is super expensive. So it's not a problem to me. It's just a problem when I've got a passenger with me and they are like, oh, what is this red light in the dashboard? But oftentimes you also get these kind of latent problems on customer side. And that's why I like to ask the question, why haven't you changed already? And then quickly you realize car has no warranty anymore at all. So I don't have to do anything about the flashy light. I can just click around in the dashboard and deactivate it manually. So why haven't you changed already? Would be my go-to.
Someone shared, I understand your point on not wanting to ask future questions, but how do you balance not asking these types of questions while also painting a vision for the customer of what the solution will look like for them if they implement?
Yes. As I mentioned, for example, with the feature request, sometimes you can ask future-based questions to create a vision in your customer's mind. I think most of us are familiar with terms like vision generation demo. But again, I would like to understand how things are today. And only then, if I've established what things are today and what the problem is today, then I would take it to a next step and ask them, okay, if this is your current metric today, and they give you a number, then you would ask them, okay, what should that number look like in the future? So root it in the current status and the current problem. And only after you've established this, start making that future vision-based scenario ideally, or sharing some customer success stories, for example. So rather than making an hypothetical case, take another customer success story and ask them whether they feel like, hey, is this something that compares to your situation? Is this something you can relate to? And then do it that way.
Another one asks, is there another framework you like for deals, like command of the message or MEDPIC?
I've been through value selling, spin selling, MEDPIC. I think I don't want to make too much advertisement, but I've created a MEDPIC framework for solution engineers, which you can download also from my website for free, which takes a slightly different perspective on MEDPIC, and especially from an SE's perspective, how you can add your unique skills and strength to this, how you can work with the MEDPIC criteria you have already put into your CRM system. So I would say it's probably the most sophisticated framework, but in my experience, whether you call it value selling, MEDPIC, spin, it's all has the same origin, also challenger sales. But MEDPIC, I think, is the most common one.
Someone asked, a big part of demoing and pre-sales is to accelerate and close the sale. Asking the prospect questions that could potentially surface a no could reflect poorly on this objective. How would you handle speaking to the benefit of this posing the risk to the deal or deal cycle?
I want to surface, but I'd rather figure out that there is a no or a potential showstopper early on, rather than very late in the sales cycle. So I've been in both roles. I've been in pre-sales, I've been in sales, I've been a hybrid role. And actually, the worst thing is if you put a deal into commit and say, yep, we're going to close this in a month's time, and suddenly there is something that you didn't consider in the first place. So I'm a huge advocate of asking these questions to address it proactively, to figure this out before it's too late, even though it's potentially putting a deal at risk. So for me, it's more riskier to not know something than to actually know about a risk.
So we have a follow-up comment that says,
yes,
I agree with you, but the rep oftentimes doesn't care. How do we sell the idea of proactively finding objections to them?
Really good point. In parallel on Slack, what I see, what more companies are doing nowadays is that they invite the solution engineering team on a regular basis to their deal forecasts. And what they usually do is they match the seller's deal stage, whether it's best case, pipeline, and commit, and then they give their own rating from a pre-sales point of view to see, okay, seller says it's commit, but pre-sale says, well, there are a couple of things we haven't necessarily talked about or we haven't surfaced. And then you start to see, okay, there's a certain gap. Here's a commit, but here is only others say it's a high risk customer. And sometimes when you address this in a larger round, you start to raise awareness that we in pre-sales can add value to these kind of deals. And then hopefully the account executives will start to ask these questions in your favor. But of course, sometimes you need to raise some awareness in front of the management teams by having this visibility and proactively sometimes even asking your account executives like, hey, have you considered asking your customer this and that question? So they feel like, oh yeah, this would be super smart. I will do it right away, rather than trying to push them to do something.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, if anyone has anything additional, please feel free to reach out to Max via LinkedIn. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much, Max, for just lending us your time and your expertise. We hope to see everyone at DemoFest next year and at the Demis next month. And we all hope you have a great rest of your day. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.